Have you ever found yourself in an argument that spiraled out of control simply because you couldn't resist reacting? In our hyper-connected world, conflicts seem to ignite faster than ever. A harsh comment online, a heated discussion at work, or even a tense moment with a loved one. We often feel compelled to respond immediately, to defend ourselves, to prove our point. But what if I told you that the real power doesn't lie in how loudly you can argue, but in how quietly you can respond? There's a profound truth hidden within this idea, one that ancient philosophers understood deeply. The Stoics, those practical thinkers from thousands of years ago, mastered the art of inner stillness precisely because they recognized that most conflicts aren't won by force, but by clarity and composure. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This simple yet radical idea shifts the entire dynamic of conflict. It suggests that true strength isn't about controlling what others say or do, but about mastering our own reactions. When we choose silence over shouting, patience over impulsivity, and reflection over retaliation, we aren't being passive, we're being strategically calm. This is the heart of the Stoic approach, recognizing that our responses either fuel the fire or extinguish it, and in a society that often equates volume with validity, learning to respond quietly can feel almost revolutionary. In this video, we're going to explore exactly how mastering the quietest response can disarm opponents, neutralize tension, and fundamentally change the way you engage with conflict. We'll dive into Stoic principles that teach us how to cultivate inner calm, even when external circumstances are chaotic. You'll discover why your silence can be more powerful than any comeback, and how stillness in communication doesn't mean weakness, it means wisdom. Whether you're dealing with difficult people, navigating professional challenges, or simply striving for more peace in your daily interactions, these insights will offer you a new way to reclaim your power. This isn't about suppressing your voice, it's about choosing when and how to use it with intention. So if you're ready to transform the way you handle conflict and discover the profound strength that comes from quiet resilience, you're in the right place. Let's begin this journey together. Stoicism teaches that your greatest strength lies in what you choose not to say. This philosophy isn't about being passive or disengaged. It's about recognizing that the only thing you truly command is your own mind and your reactions. The ancient Stoics called this inner sovereignty the unshakable authority you hold over your own judgments, impulses, and responses. While we can't control the words or actions of others, we have absolute dominion over how we interpret events and whether we allow them to disturb our peace. This shift in focus from external outcomes to internal stability is what builds genuine emotional resilience. When you stop seeking validation or victory in arguments and instead focus on maintaining your own composure, you tap into a profound source of personal power. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of history's most influential Stoic teachers, framed this idea with striking clarity. He said, "Some things are within our control and some things are not. Our opinions are within our control, our impulses, desires, aversions. Our bodies are not within our control, nor our possessions, our reputations, or our public offices." This distinction is the bedrock of Stoic practice. Your opponent's words, their criticism, their attempts to provoke you, these all belong in the category of things outside your control. But your silence, your patience, your refusal to be baited into an emotional reaction, these are entirely within your command. By investing your energy only in what you can control, you conserve your strength and operate from a position of unassailable calm. Consider a common scenario. You're receiving harsh, unfair criticism during a team meeting. The natural impulse might be to interrupt, defend yourself, or retaliate with a sharp remark. But imagine instead that you choose to remain completely silent. You simply listen, maintaining steady eye contact and a neutral expression. You don't agree with the criticism, but you don't feel the need to refute it immediately either. What happens in that room is almost magical. The critic, expecting a defensive outburst or a heated exchange, finds their words landing on empty air. Without the fuel of your reaction, their anger often sputters and dies. They might even feel unsettled or foolish as the silence stretches on. By withholding your response, you've not only protected your own peace, but also subtly exposed the emptiness of their aggression. This quiet restraint demonstrates a strength that shouting never could. Think back to a moment in your own life when you chose not to respond in kind. Perhaps during a family disagreement, you bit your tongue instead of saying something hurtful. Or maybe at work, you received a frustrating email and decided to wait an hour before replying. In that space of silence, what shifted? Did the other person's power over the situation seem to diminish? Did you find that your own clarity increased? That's the practical magic of Stoic inner sovereignty at work. It's not about winning arguments, it's about winning back your own peace of mind, regardless of the chaos swirling around you. Have you ever noticed how someone's anger seems to fade when it meets no resistance? It's almost as if their emotional outburst requires an audience, a reaction, to sustain its intensity. This isn't just a social observation, it's a core Stoic insight into the nature of power and control. The energy behind another person's aggression, their criticism, or their attempts to provoke you isn't a self-sustaining force. It draws its strength from your engagement. When you react emotionally, you're effectively handing over a piece of your inner stability to fuel their drama. But when you respond with silence or calm detachment, you break that cycle. You stop feeding the fire, and without your participation, the conflict simply can't burn as brightly, or sometimes at all. The Stoics understood that what we often perceive as another person's power over us is, in reality, an illusion, a performance that only works if we agree to play our part. We grant others authority to disturb our peace by how we choose to respond. Seneca, the Roman statesman and Stoic philosopher, captured this perfectly when he wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." He observed that anger, when left unanswered, has a tendency to consume itself. It's like a fire with no oxygen. It flares up dramatically but then sputters out into ashes. By introducing a pause, a moment of deliberate silence, you deny that emotional fire what it needs to keep burning. You're not suppressing your feelings, you're simply choosing not to offer them as kindling to someone else's outburst. History offers powerful examples of this principle in action. Consider the demeanor of Abraham Lincoln during the most divisive period in American history. He was constantly met with fierce criticism, personal insults, and outright hostility from political opponents, the press, and even members of his own cabinet. Rather than responding in kind or engaging in public feuds, Lincoln often chose to respond with silence, patience, or a thoughtful letter that he sometimes never even sent. This calm refusal to be baited into emotional reactions infuriated his critics even more, because they could not get the rise out of him they so desperately wanted. His quiet resilience didn't just protect his own focus and energy, it gradually drained the power from the attacks themselves, allowing his actions and policies to speak louder than any retaliatory words ever could. His opponent's power was an illusion that his silence helped to expose. This brings us to a crucial reflective point. What are you giving power to through your own responses? Every time you feel compelled to immediately answer a provocation, every time you rush to defend yourself against a minor slight, or every time you engage in an argument that you know leads nowhere, you are conferring authority onto someone else. You are voting with your emotional energy for what matters in your life. The Stoic invitation is to become more conscious of that vote. To ask yourself before you react, am I responding because it is virtuous and necessary, or simply because my ego has been triggered? What will this engagement truly cost me in terms of my peace and focus? By bringing this level of awareness to your interactions, you start to reclaim the power you've been giving away. You begin to see that the quietest response isn't about losing a battle. It's about winning back your sovereignty by refusing to fight on someone else's terms. Stoics practiced cognitive detachment to see events objectively without personalizing them. This isn't about becoming cold or indifferent to the world around you. It's about creating a crucial space between what happens and how you choose to respond. Think of it as building a mental observatory, a quiet place inside your mind where you can watch the storm of emotions and external events without feeling like you have to be in the storm itself. Cognitive detachment allows you to recognize that an insult, a criticism, or a provocation is not an inherent part of you. It's merely an external event, a piece of data. By refusing to immediately internalize it, you grant yourself the freedom to respond from a place of principle rather than impulse. This mental distance is what makes quieter responses not only possible but profoundly effective. Marcus Aurelius offered a powerful technique for achieving this perspective. He advised himself to regularly step back and view human affairs from a vast, almost cosmic distance. He wrote, "How quickly all things disappear, in the universe the bodies themselves, but in time the remembrance of them. What is it to be praised by others or to be blamed?" This exercise isn't meant to make life seem meaningless, but rather to shrink our immediate dramas down to their true size. When you feel the heat of anger rising because a coworker took credit for your idea, try this. Imagine viewing the entire scene from 100 miles above the earth. From that vantage point, the office building is a tiny speck, and the conflict is invisible. This shift in perspective doesn't make the injustice disappear, but it does strip it of its overwhelming emotional power. It becomes a manageable event, not a world-ending crisis. This is the higher perspective that allows for clarity instead of chaos. Consider a typical workplace scenario. You've just finished presenting a project you poured weeks of effort into, and a colleague immediately dismisses your work as uninspired in front of the entire team. The immediate, raw emotional trigger might be a sharp feeling of humiliation, followed by a surge of anger and a desperate urge to fire back a cutting remark to defend your worth. This is where cognitive detachment becomes your most valuable tool. Instead of reacting from that hurt place, you pause. You mentally detach by observing the comment as an external fact. My colleague said the word uninspired. You then choose not to personally attach your entire self-worth to that single word. You might even consider the comment from your colleague's perspective. Perhaps they are insecure, having a bad day, or simply mistaken. This detached observation allows you to respond not with a defensive outburst, but perhaps with a quiet, curious question. I'd be interested to hear what specific aspects you feel could be stronger. This response, born from detachment, is far more likely to lead to a productive conversation and completely neutralizes the attempt to provoke an emotional reaction. Now bring this concept closer to home. What is one specific emotional trigger that consistently pulls you into a reactive state? Perhaps it's a particular type of criticism from your partner, a certain tone of voice your boss uses, or even the way a family member ignores your advice. For the next week, make it a practice to simply observe that trigger without immediately reacting to it. When you feel that familiar spike of emotion, mentally label it. There is my trigger about being disrespected, or that is my button about not being heard. Don't judge the feeling or try to force it away, just notice it. By becoming a conscious observer of your own emotional patterns, you initiate the process of cognitive detachment. You begin the vital work of separating the external event from your internal narrative, and in that space, you will find the quiet power to choose your response rather than being chosen by your reactions. Before you speak, take a breath. This simple pause is a Stoic superpower. It's a tiny pocket of time where you reclaim sovereignty over your impulses and choose your next move with intention, rather than being swept away by the current of emotion. In that brief silence, you exercise one of the most fundamental Stoic practices, the discipline of assent. You are not automatically agreeing with the provocative impression that just landed in your mind. You are not immediately accepting that a criticism is true, an insult is damaging, or a challenge is a threat. Instead, you are creating a buffer zone between the event and your reaction, a sacred space where your rational mind can assess the situation before your emotions command a response. This isn't just a good idea. For the Stoics, it was a non-negotiable exercise in self-governance. Epictetus, who spent his life teaching how to achieve mental freedom, gave incredibly practical advice on this very point. He instructed his students to mentally say to every troubling impression that arises, "Wait, let me see who you are and what you represent." This is the essence of the pause. It's the mental equivalent of not opening your front door to every stranger who knocks. You first look through the peephole to see who is there and what they want. Is this impression truthful? Is it helpful? Is it within my control? By asking these questions in the space of a single breath, you move from being a passive reactor to an active commander of your inner world. You are examining the merchandise before you buy it, ensuring you don't purchase a story of offense or anger that you don't actually need. Imagine a heated discussion with a loved one where old patterns start to emerge. They say something that perfectly targets a familiar insecurity, and you feel the well-rehearsed cutting retort rising to your lips. It would feel so satisfying to say it, to win that momentary point. But this is precisely where the power of pause changes everything. Instead of speaking, you consciously choose to close your mouth, soften your gaze, and take one deep, silent breath. In that 2-second window, a cascade of possibilities opens up. You might remember that this person is not your enemy but someone you care about, struggling with their own pain. You might realize that winning this argument would actually mean losing connection. That pause allows a more virtuous thought to surface, perhaps one of compassion or patience, and your response shifts from "you always do this" to a quieter, more powerful question. It feels like we're both getting upset. Can we take a moment? This simple act of restraint can de-escalate a situation that might have otherwise caused lasting damage. The true power of this practice is that it's a skill anyone can develop, starting with the very next conversation that tests your patience. Make it your intention to insert that small, deliberate space before you reply. You don't need to make a grand production of it. It can be entirely internal. When you feel the urge to interrupt, defend, or retaliate, let that feeling be your cue to pause. Notice the physical sensation, the tightness in your chest, the heat in your face, and just breathe into it for a moment. That pause is where your freedom lies. It's the difference between being a puppet whose strings are pulled by every external comment and being the puppeteer who chooses which strings to engage. This week, see if you can catch yourself just once. In that moment of chosen silence, you are not losing the argument. You are winning back your peace and your power. In Stoicism, silence is often the most powerful reply. This is a radical departure from how we typically view communication, where we're taught that to be heard, we must speak up, that to be strong, we must push back. But the Stoic understands that true strength isn't demonstrated through volume or verbosity. It's demonstrated through the disciplined, strategic application of quiet. This kind of silence is not empty or passive. It is a full, conscious, and active choice, a deliberate withholding of the reaction that an opponent is attempting to provoke. It is a form of communication in itself, one that speaks volumes about your inner fortitude and self-control. By choosing silence, you are not conceding the argument. You are changing the very rules of the game, refusing to play on a battlefield where emotional reactivity is the only weapon. Seneca, who wrote extensively on anger and peace, captured the formidable nature of this quiet strength. He observed, "There is a great difference between a man who wants to say something and a man who could say something but chooses not to." This distinction is everything. The first person is a slave to their impulse, itching to release the pressure of their feelings. The second is a master of their will, possessing the power to speak but wisely calculating that silence will serve a higher purpose. This is the strength found in quiet endurance. It is the power of the unthrown punch, the unspoken curse, the unreleased arrow. It conserves your energy, protects your dignity, and very often leaves the person expecting a fight disoriented and powerless, their aggression having found no target to latch onto. History provides a profound example of this principle in one of the most pressurized environments imaginable, the courtroom. Consider the strategy of Nelson Mandela during his historic trial in 1964. Facing the possibility of a death sentence from the apartheid regime, Mandela was given the opportunity to make a statement. He delivered a powerful, 3-hour speech that concluded not with a plea for mercy, but with a defiant statement of his principles. However, it was what happened next that demonstrated supreme strategic silence. After being convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, he was led from the courtroom. He did not shout, he did not struggle, he did not curse his captors. His silence was deafening. It was not the silence of defeat, but the silence of immense moral authority and resolve. That quiet dignity in the face of injustice spoke louder to the world and to his oppressors than any outburst ever could. It immediately began to dismantle their narrative of him as a mere radical and started to build his legacy as a statesman. His silence became an active force that ultimately contributed to his captors' loss of power and moral standing. This kind of strategic silence isn't reserved for world leaders. It's incredibly potent in the fabric of our daily lives. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague continuously interrupts and dismisses your contributions. The common, reactive approach is to interrupt them back, to speak louder, to engage in a verbal tug of war for dominance. This almost always escalates tension and makes both parties look unprofessional. The Stoic approach is to simply stop talking when they interrupt. You sit back, you listen calmly, and you let their rudeness hang in the air, exposed for everyone to see. You deny them the conflict they seem to be seeking. When they finally finish, you do not immediately fire back. You allow a moment of potent silence to settle. Then you respond calmly to the original point, not to their interruption. This disciplined silence asserts control not over the other person, but over the situation itself. It demonstrates that your value isn't contingent on their validation and that you cannot be so easily baited into a petty squabble. Think about your own interactions for a moment. Can you identify a recent situation where you felt compelled to argue, to have the last word, or to prove a point? Now, reimagine that same scenario with the power of strategic silence. What if, instead of engaging, you had simply remained quiet? Not a sullen, resentful silence, but a calm, intentional, and observant one. How might the dynamic have shifted? Would the other person have lost their footing? Would you have maintained your energy and composure? The goal of this reflection isn't to breed regret, but to build awareness for the future. The next time you feel that familiar urge to retaliate, see if you can experiment with this Stoic tool. Choose to let your silence be your answer. You may just find that in saying nothing, you communicate everything. How we perceive an attack determines its power over us. This is one of the most liberating ideas in Stoic philosophy, the recognition that an event itself holds no inherent emotional charge. The sting of an insult, the frustration of a setback, the anger from a criticism, these are not qualities of the events themselves, but of the judgments we layer on top of them. The event is neutral, it simply is. Our mind is the artist that paints it with meaning, color, and drama. When someone shouts a cruel remark, the sound waves hitting your eardrum are just vibrations in the air. It is your instantaneous, often unconscious, interpretation that transforms those vibrations into a personal assault, triggering a cascade of defensive emotions. The quiet response, therefore, is not just about controlling your mouth. It's first about mastering your perceptions. It's about learning to press the pause button on your automatic judgments and choosing a more empowering, more rational interpretation of what just happened. Marcus Aurelius dedicated much of his private writings to this exact practice of reassessing his initial impressions. He constantly reminded himself to strip away the value judgments he automatically added to events. He advised, take away your opinion, and then there is taken away the complaint, I have been harmed. Take away the complaint, I have been harmed, and the harm is taken away. This is the core of perceptual alchemy. He isn't suggesting you pretend a harmful action didn't occur. He is urging you to dissect the event from the story you're telling about it. The event is that a person said certain words. The story you might automatically tell is, they said that to disrespect me and undermine my authority, and that has damaged my standing. The Stoic work is to challenge that story. Is it truly disrespect, or could it be a clumsy attempt at humor? Is it meant to undermine you, or is this person simply fearful and lashing out? Even if the intent was malicious, has it actually damaged your character or your capabilities, or only your pride? By changing the story, you change the emotional impact, and a quiet, composed response becomes the most natural reaction. Consider a story from the world of classical music. A young, talented violist is performing a difficult solo with a renowned orchestra. Midway through the piece, a respected but notoriously harsh conductor stops the entire ensemble. He turns to the violist and says, in front of everyone, your tone sounds like a rusty gate swinging in the wind. Have you even practiced? The immediate, raw perception would understandably be one of public humiliation and shame. The natural reaction might be to tear up, to snap back defensively, or to become so flustered that the rest of the performance is ruined. But imagine if the musician practiced Stoic perception management. Instead of accepting the comment as a definitive judgment on her worth, she pauses. She strips the event down to its neutral components. The conductor made a sound criticism about my tone using an unkind metaphor. She then reassesses the judgment. Perhaps his harshness isn't about her at all, but about his own perfectionism and pressure to deliver a flawless concert. Perhaps the metaphor, while rude, contains a kernel of useful feedback about her technique. By perceiving the event not as a personal attack but as a poorly delivered piece of coaching, she drains it of its emotional venom. She might simply nod calmly, say, "Thank you, maestro, I'll adjust," and begin the passage again with renewed focus. Her quiet, professional response, born from a shifted perception, completely disarms the conductor's attempt to provoke a reaction and instead earns her the respect of the entire orchestra. Now bring this power of perception to a current conflict in your own life. It might be a recurring argument with a partner, a frustrating dynamic with a coworker, or even a simmering resentment toward a relative. Identify the specific event that triggers you, then try the Marcus Aurelius exercise. Write down the event in the most neutral, factual language possible, as if you were a security camera simply recording data. Person A said the words X at time Y. Now, directly below it, write down the story you automatically tell yourself about that event. They said that because they don't respect me, and it means I am not valued. Finally, and this is the crucial step, brainstorm 3 other possible interpretations for why that event occurred. Maybe they said it because they are stressed about an unrelated problem. Maybe it was a misguided attempt to be helpful. Maybe their comment was actually a reflection of their own insecurity, not a judgment on you. By consciously engaging in this act of perceptual reassessment, you are not being naive. You are being strategic. You are expanding your menu of possible responses beyond the single, reactive one. You are taking back the power that you had handed over by accepting your first, often unhelpful, interpretation as the only truth. Stoic acceptance isn't about giving up, it's about focusing energy where it counts. This is one of the most misunderstood principles of Stoicism. People often mistake acceptance for resignation, a kind of passive surrender to whatever life throws at you. But the Stoic version is anything but passive. It is an active, conscious, and strategic decision to stop fighting against the unchangeable facts of reality, so that you can redirect all your power toward what you can actually influence, your own judgments, your actions, and your responses. When you waste energy railing against things outside your control, the weather, traffic, another person's opinion, a past mistake, you drain your emotional reserves and become volatile, reactive, and easily provoked. Acceptance, in the Stoic sense, is how you plug that leak. It is the practice of making peace with what is so that you can respond to it with clarity and quiet strength, rather than with frantic resistance. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and thus understood powerlessness in the most visceral way, laid the foundation for this idea with his famous dichotomy of control. He taught, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. This isn't a suggestion, it's a recipe for mental survival and flourishing. He isn't telling us to be happy about adversity, but to stop being surprised and emotionally devastated by it, by fully accepting that certain things, like the actions of others, the outcomes of our efforts, or global events, are simply not ours to command. We free up an enormous amount of psychological bandwidth. That energy is then available for the one thing we truly own, our will, our character, and our virtue. Acceptance is the act of turning down the volume on the world's chaos so you can hear your own inner wisdom clearly. Imagine a personal setback that feels overwhelmingly unfair. You prepared meticulously for a major promotion, you delivered exceptional results, and yet the role was given to someone else. The initial, raw reaction might be a storm of indignation, resentment, and frustration. You might spend days replaying the injustice in your mind, complaining to friends, and mentally arguing with your boss. This emotional turbulence doesn't change the outcome. It only poisons your present moment and clouds your judgment. Now, apply Stoic acceptance. The first step is to honestly categorize the event. The decision to give the promotion to another person is outside my control. It is in the past, I cannot change it. This isn't admitting defeat, it's acknowledging reality. The second step is to redirect your focus to what remains within your control, your interpretation of the event and your subsequent actions. You can choose to see it not as a verdict on your worth, but as a redirection. You can decide to seek constructive feedback to improve your skills further, or to explore new opportunities elsewhere. By accepting the fact you cannot change, you drain the situation of its emotional volatility and empower yourself to respond with calm, purposeful action rather than reactive despair. The peace that follows isn't numbness, it's the quiet power of someone who is no longer at war with reality. This practice invites a deeply personal reflection. What is one thing in your life right now that you are struggling against, that you desperately wish were different, but that is ultimately outside your direct control? It might be a health diagnosis, the behavior of a family member, a financial situation, or even a past regret that you continually replay. The resistance itself, the internal arguing, the wishing it weren't so, is the source of your ongoing distress. The Stoic question is, what would it feel like to consciously, deliberately accept that this thing is simply part of your current reality? Not to approve of it, not to like it, but to stop fighting its existence. Imagine the mental energy that would be freed up if you stopped trying to change the unchangeable. That energy could then be invested in how you choose to move forward within this new reality. Acceptance in this light isn't a weakness, it's the most pragmatic and powerful step toward reclaiming your peace and your agency. Stoics used negative visualization to ready themselves for worst-case scenarios without fear. This practice, known in ancient Greek as premeditatio malorum, wasn't about cultivating pessimism or expecting the worst to happen. Instead, it was a deliberate mental exercise designed to build resilience by removing the element of shock from adversity. By regularly imagining the loss of things we cherish, our health, our relationships, our possessions, or our social standing, we perform a kind of emotional inoculation. We expose ourselves to these possibilities in the safe confines of our own minds, which allows us to process the accompanying fears and anxieties on our own terms. When we do this, we discover a profound truth. The anticipation of loss is often far more terrifying than the reality itself. This practice systematically dismantles the power that potential misfortune holds over our peace of mind, allowing us to face the future not with dread, but with a calm and steady preparedness. Seneca, a master of this technique, wrote extensively about its value. He advised, "We should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events." He wasn't suggesting we live in a state of constant worry. He was advocating for a form of mental rehearsalism, much like a fire drill. We don't conduct fire drills because we expect the building to burn down. We do it so that if the alarm ever sounds, we don't panic. Our actions become calm, deliberate, and effective because we have walked through the steps countless times in our minds. Seneca believed that by premeditating adversity, we endure poverty with a greater mind and wean ourselves from the things that will someday wean themselves from us. This process of mental weaning is the core of the practice. It gently loosens our grip on externals, reminding us that while we may enjoy them, our ultimate worth and tranquility do not depend on them. Consider how this could transform a common modern anxiety, the fear of public criticism. Imagine you are about to present a new idea to a skeptical audience. The natural, unexamined mind might try to bolster its confidence by only visualizing success, hoping for the best while secretly dreading the worst. This approach makes you incredibly vulnerable. If the first critical question lands, it feels like a sudden, devastating ambush. Your heart races, your mind goes blank, and you react defensively. Now apply negative visualization. Before the meeting, you sit quietly and mentally walk through the worst-case scenario. You vividly imagine someone in the audience dismissing your idea as unworkable. You picture the nods of agreement from others. You feel the initial sting of embarrassment, but then you don't stop there. You continue the visualization. You see yourself taking a calm breath. You picture yourself nodding thoughtfully and responding, "That's a fair concern. Could you help me understand which specific part seems unworkable to you?" By mentally rehearsing the criticism and your calm, collected response to it, you accomplish two things. First, you desensitize yourself to the emotional trigger. The criticism, when it comes, feels familiar rather than shocking. Second, you have a pre-planned, virtuous response ready, which prevents you from being hijacked by panic in the moment. The event becomes manageable, and you remain the calm, authoritative figure in the room. This powerful tool is something you can integrate into your life starting today. Think of an upcoming situation that holds some anxiety for you, a difficult conversation, a financial decision, a professional evaluation. Set aside just a few minutes of quiet time to practice this Stoic exercise. Close your eyes and vividly imagine the outcome you fear most. Don't just skim the surface, really sit with the details and the initial discomfort. Then, crucially, visualize yourself navigating that outcome with stoic calm. See yourself accepting the result without internal turmoil, focusing only on what is within your control, your character, your response, your next move. How does mentally embracing this possibility change your relationship to the upcoming event? Does it make the fear feel smaller and more manageable? This isn't about attracting negativity. It's about robbing potential adversity of its power to surprise and destabilize you, allowing you to meet all of life's moments with unwavering composure. Inner stillness is the anchor that keeps you steady when others are losing control. In the heart of a storm, it's not the wind that determines your fate, but the depth of your roots. The Stoics understood that external chaos is a constant in human life. Markets crash, plans fail, people behave unpredictably. What separates the serene from the frantic is not the absence of turmoil, but the presence of an unshakable inner calm. This tranquility, or euthymia as the Greeks called it, is a state of soul where the mind is not disturbed by the passions, not jerked around by every external event. It is a cultivated quietude that allows you to observe the chaos without being consumed by it, to engage with the world from a place of centered peace rather than reactive panic. Marcus Aurelius, who governed a vast empire perpetually on the brink of war and crisis, constantly returned to this theme in his private writings. He sought to remind himself that the source of all peace was internal. He wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig." This beautiful metaphor points to a profound truth. Stillness isn't something you find in a quiet room. It's something you generate from within, a wellspring you can access no matter how loud the world becomes. For the Stoics, this inner digging was a disciplined practice. It wasn't about escaping to a mountaintop. It was about building a fortress of calm inside your own mind, a place you could retreat to at a moment's notice, even in the middle of a crowded, noisy argument. The techniques to cultivate this were as practical as they were profound. While they didn't use the word meditation as we do today, their practice of morning and evening reflection served a similar purpose. Each morning, a Stoic would preview the day ahead not with anxiety, but with a calm readiness, mentally preparing for the obstacles and irritations they might face. This was a rehearsal for maintaining composure. Then, each evening, they would engage in a rigorous review of their own actions. Had they lived according to their principles? Where had they allowed themselves to be disturbed by externals? This daily audit wasn't about self-punishment. It was a gentle, consistent recalibration of the soul toward stillness, a way of sanding down the rough edges of their reactions until their inner world was smooth and undisturbed. Consider a simple, daily scenario where this virtue changes everything. You're stuck in terrible traffic, running late for an important appointment. The car in front of you is moving erratically, and your frustration begins to boil over. Your hands grip the wheel tighter, your heart rate climbs, and you feel the urge to honk or shout. This is the chaos. Now, apply the Stoic anchor of inner stillness. Instead of feeding the frustration, you take one deep breath and turn your attention inward. You acknowledge the situation. I am in traffic. This is outside my control. You then consciously redirect your focus to what is within your control. Your breathing, your posture, the music you choose to listen to, and the thoughts you allow to occupy your mind. You might even use the unexpected pause as an opportunity for a moment of reflection. By doing this, you don't magically clear the traffic, but you completely neutralize its power to agitate you. You arrive at your appointment 5 minutes late but composed and clear-headed, rather than 20 minutes late and emotionally frayed. Your stillness hasn't just protected your peace, it has made you more effective for whatever comes next. The beauty of this practice is that it requires no special equipment or environment. It only requires your intention. This week, I invite you to experiment with this power. Carve out just 5 minutes each day to deliberately practice stillness. It doesn't have to be a formal, cross-legged meditation unless that appeals to you. It can be as simple as sitting with your coffee in complete silence, focusing only on the sensation of drinking it. Or it could be a 5-minute walk where you pay attention only to the feeling of your feet on the ground, deliberately letting go of every planning or worrying thought that arises. In those 5 minutes, you are not doing nothing, you are doing the most important thing. You are digging Marcus Aurelius's well, strengthening your inner anchor, and building the resilience you will need to be the calmest person in the room when chaos inevitably arrives. Stoics taught that we don't have to agree with every provocation that comes our way. This is the heart of what they called the discipline of assent, the practice of consciously withholding your mental agreement from the initial, often negative, impressions that arise in your mind. Think of your mind as a courtroom. Every time something happens, someone criticizes you, you get cut off in traffic, a plan falls through, an impression, like a lawyer, immediately stands up and presents its case to the judge, which is your rational faculty. This impression doesn't just present facts, it comes with a ready-made interpretation and a powerful emotional charge. It says, that person meant to disrespect you, or this traffic jam is ruining your entire day. The discipline of assent is the judge's gavel. It is your power to say, I see this impression, but I do not accept your conclusion. I will deliberate on this before I render a verdict. This moment of pause between the impression and your assent is where your true freedom in communication resides. Epictetus, whose teachings were entirely focused on achieving inner freedom, gave us perhaps the clearest instruction on this practice. He said, it's not what happens to you but how you react to it that matters. But he went even deeper, explaining that the reaction itself is preceded by this critical act of assent. He advised, don't be seized by your impressions, check them, say to them, wait for me a little, impression. Let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me test you. This testing is the work of the rational mind. Is this impression true? Is it helpful? Is it based on a complete picture? Or is it a knee-jerk judgment fueled by ego or insecurity? By introducing this buffer of questioning, you strip the provocative event of its automatic power to trigger you. You are no longer a puppet whose strings are pulled by every external comment. You become the puppeteer, carefully choosing which strings to pull and which to leave slack. Imagine a scenario many of us have faced. You send a detailed, thoughtful email to a colleague proposing a new way to handle a project. Their reply is brief, containing just a few lines that poke holes in your idea without offering any constructive alternatives. The immediate, automatic impression that arises might scream, they're dismissing my work, they don't value my contribution, this is a personal attack. If you automatically assent to that impression, if you gavel it into truth without a trial, your emotional response will be immediate. You might fire back a defensive email, CC a manager to escalate the issue, or seethe with resentment for the rest of the day. Now replay that scenario using the discipline of assent. The email arrives, you feel the initial flash of heat, but instead of assenting, you pause. You examine the impression. You might consider alternative interpretations. Maybe they're incredibly busy, and this was just a rushed response. Maybe they misunderstood a key part of my proposal. Perhaps they're having a bad day, and this isn't about me at all. By withholding your agreement from the initial inflammatory interpretation, you create space for a quieter, more strategic response. You might reply, "Thanks for your quick feedback. I sense some concerns here. Would you be open to a quick 5-minute chat later so I can better understand your perspective and we can align?" This response, born from disciplined assent, completely disarms the potential conflict. It demonstrates professionalism, seeks clarity, and keeps the conversation productive. It refuses to take the bait. This practice invites a simple but powerful shift in your daily awareness. For the next 24 hours, make it a game to simply notice your automatic assents. You don't have to change them immediately, just become a curious observer of your own mind. When a driver honks at you, notice the impression that immediately labels them a jerk and observe yourself assenting to that label. When a family member makes an offhand comment, notice the impression that assigns a negative motive to them and watch yourself agreeing with it. This act of noticing is the first and most crucial step. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. You begin to see how many of your emotional reactions and communication breakdowns start not with the event itself, but with your swift, unexamined agreement with a negative story about that event. The power to choose a quieter, more powerful response begins the moment you realize you have the right to reserve your judgment. Temperance isn't about suppression, it's about purposeful restraint. This is a vital distinction that lies at the very heart of Stoic practice. Many people mistakenly believe that being temperate means bottling up emotions, silencing your true feelings, or pretending you aren't bothered by something that genuinely hurts. But the Stoic concept of temperance is something far more powerful and nuanced. It is the conscious, deliberate choice to moderate your expression, your words, your tone, your physical reactions, so that they align with your deepest values and long-term goals rather than with the fleeting heat of an impulsive moment. It is the practice of channeling a river rather than building a dam. You are not stopping the water's flow, but you are guiding its direction and power to serve a purpose, to prevent a flood. This kind of restraint is an active expression of strength, a demonstration that you are in command of your own internal state. Seneca, who wrote so eloquently on the corrosive nature of anger, also celebrated the quiet power that comes from moderation. He observed, "The greatest power is exercised through restraint and moderation." Notice he doesn't say the greatest power is found in silence or inaction. He specifically identifies restraint and moderation as the active ingredients. This is because a moderated response is a chosen response. It is a display of power that is entirely under your control. When you speak with measured words, you are not speaking weakly, you are speaking with precision. When you choose not to raise your voice in an argument, you are not conceding. You are conserving your energy and your dignity for a more impactful moment. This Stoic virtue ensures that your expressions are tools you use with intention, not weapons that use you in a moment of passion. Consider a common domestic scenario that could easily spiral out of control. A couple is discussing their finances, a topic fraught with stress and vulnerability. One partner, feeling anxious about an unexpected bill, says with an edge of accusation in their voice, you never seem to worry about how much we're spending. The automatic, impulsive response, the one fueled by hurt and defensiveness, might be to snap back. That's because you're always too busy worrying for both of us. Why don't you just relax for once? This kind of retort is like throwing gasoline on a small flame. It immediately ignites a larger fight about character, respect, and past grievances. Now imagine the application of Stoic temperance. The second partner feels the sting of the comment and the urge to retaliate, but instead they exercise purposeful restraint. They take a brief pause, allowing the initial impulse to pass. They then choose a response aligned with the virtue of their relationship, which is partnership, not point scoring. They might say in a calm tone, "I hear that you're worried about the spending, and that's completely valid. I'm sorry if my calmness has felt like I don't care. Can we look at the budget together so we're both on the same page?" This measured, temperate reply does several things at once. It validates the other person's emotion. It accepts partial responsibility without admitting to a fault that isn't true, and it immediately redirects the energy toward a collaborative solution. The potential argument is completely disarmed, and the conversation becomes productive instead of destructive. The restraint shown here wasn't weakness, it was the highest form of relational strength. This practice invites a very personal and practical reflection. Where in your own communications could the purposeful restraint of temperance make the most significant difference? It might not be in a huge, dramatic confrontation, but in a small, repeated pattern that slowly erodes your peace. Perhaps it's the tendency to interrupt a colleague in meetings because you're so eager to make your point. Maybe it's the habit of sending a terse, one-word text message when you feel slighted, knowing it will provoke the other person. Or it could be the internal pressure you feel to always have the last word in a disagreement with your teenager, even when the relationship is more important than being right. Identify just one of these patterns. For the next week, make that single interaction your laboratory for practicing temperance. Before you speak or type, ask yourself one simple question. Is this response coming from a virtuous place, or is it just an impulse? That tiny moment of inquiry is where the power lies. It is the space where you reclaim your ability to choose who you want to be in that conversation. Stoic empathy means seeking to understand before seeking to be understood. This principle might seem at odds with the popular image of Stoicism as an emotionless philosophy, but nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics weren't against empathy. They were against being controlled by the passions that often masquerade as empathy, like pity or sentimental attachment. True Stoic empathy is an intellectual and virtuous practice. It is the deliberate act of stepping outside your own immediate judgments and emotional reactions to genuinely consider the world from another person's vantage point. You are not required to agree with them or condone their actions. The goal is simply to understand the internal logic of their behavior, their fears, their desires, their misunderstandings. This act of understanding is one of the most potent de-escalation tools available to us, because when you truly see why someone is acting a certain way, their actions often lose their power to offend or provoke you. Your response can then come from a place of calm comprehension rather than defensive reaction. Marcus Aurelius consistently returned to this idea of shared humanity as the foundation for this kind of empathy. He reminded himself, when another blames you or hates you, or people voice similar criticisms, go to their souls, penetrate inside, and see what sort of people they are. You will realize that there is no need to be racked with anxiety that they should hold any particular opinion about you. This is the technical application of Stoic empathy. He isn't telling himself to ignore the criticism. He is instructing himself to actively investigate the soul of the critic. What experiences have shaped them? What insecurities might be driving their need to blame? What false impressions might they be operating under? By doing this intellectual work, you accomplish two things. First, you often find that their behavior has very little to do with you and everything to do with their own internal struggles. Second, you reconnect with the Stoic concept of sympatheia, the interconnectedness of all human beings. You see them not as a malicious antagonist, but as a flawed human being like yourself, doing what they believe is right based on their limited knowledge and nature. This perspective naturally softens your heart and quietens your tongue. Imagine a misunderstanding that could easily spiral into a major conflict. A manager has just implemented a new reporting system designed to streamline workflow. One of her most experienced employees, John, immediately becomes resistant, offering curt criticisms in meetings and dragging his feet on adoption. The manager's initial impression might be one of frustration and insult. He's undermining my authority. He's resistant to change. He doesn't respect my leadership. If she assents to these impressions, her response will likely be defensive and authoritative, perhaps a stern directive that only deepens the rift. Now apply Stoic empathy. Instead of reacting, she chooses to seek understanding. She schedules a one-on-one meeting not to discipline but to listen. She opens with, "John, I've noticed some hesitation with the new system, and your experience is invaluable to this team. I'd genuinely like to understand your concerns." She then employs the power of empathetic silence. She asks a question and then simply waits, creating a safe space for him to speak. In that quiet, non-judgmental atmosphere, John opens up. He reveals that the new system's interface is nearly identical to one used at a previous company where he was part of a mass layoff. His resistance isn't about defiance, it's about fear and past trauma. The manager's understanding of the situation is completely transformed. Her response can now shift from enforcing compliance to offering reassurance and perhaps even minor adjustments. The conflict evaporates because it was built on a misunderstanding, and empathy was the tool that uncovered the truth beneath the surface. This practice invites a shift that can transform your most challenging relationships. Bring to mind a person you currently find difficult, someone whose actions consistently irritate or hurt you. Now, make a conscious effort to step into their world for just a few moments. Set aside your own story about why they do what they do. Instead, brainstorm 3 possible reasons for their behavior that have nothing to do with you. Maybe their sharp tone is because they're in physical pain they haven't disclosed. Perhaps their micromanaging comes from a place of deep insecurity about their own job performance. Maybe their negativity is a defense mechanism against a past betrayal you know nothing about. You don't have to confirm these theories. The exercise itself is what matters. By generating alternative, compassionate explanations, you break the hypnotic grip of your own narrative of grievance. You open a door to quieter, more curious responses. The next time this person acts in that familiar, frustrating way, instead of reacting with irritation, you might find yourself responding with a simple, calm question, driven by a genuine desire to understand rather than to win. Stoics kept their eyes on the bigger picture, not the momentary provocation. This practice of maintaining a long-term perspective is the very essence of Stoic equanimity, a steady, unshakable calm that comes from prioritizing your ultimate objectives over the fleeting satisfaction of an immediate, emotional reaction. When you are deeply anchored in what you are trying to build over the course of your life, your character, your integrity, your contributions, the daily irritations and deliberate provocations of others begin to seem small and insignificant. They become like minor weather patterns on a long journey. They might be momentarily unpleasant, but they cannot alter your destination unless you choose to abandon the helm and let the storm take control. This broader viewpoint systematically drains conflicts of their perceived urgency and power, allowing you to respond from a place of strategic patience rather than reflexive defense. Seneca, who faced exile, chronic illness, and the volatile politics of Nero's court, wrote extensively about this long-view endurance. He advised, "We must make it our aim to have already lived long enough. Let us prepare our minds as if we had reached the end of our life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's account every day. The greatest flaw in life is that it is always incomplete." This might sound morbid at first, but its purpose is profoundly liberating. By regularly contemplating the finiteness of our time, we are forced to clarify what truly matters. A petty insult, a professional slight, a social snub when held up against the backdrop of a limited life, these things are revealed for the trivialities they are. This perspective doesn't make us passive. It makes us fiercely focused on investing our precious time and energy only in pursuits and responses that align with our deepest values and long-term goals. Enduring a momentary hardship with calm is not about suffering in silence. It is about conserving your strength for the battles that truly define your journey. History offers a powerful testament to this principle in the life of the Roman general Scipio Africanus. During the Second Punic War, he was given command of the Roman forces in Spain, a theater that had seen nothing but defeat and disaster. Rather than immediately seeking a glorious, decisive battle to avenge past losses, a move that would have satisfied the Roman public's thirst for immediate revenge but likely ended in another catastrophe, Scipio took the long view. He spent months training his army, studying his opponent's tactics, and building alliances with local tribes. He endured criticism from Rome for his apparent lack of aggressive action. His opponents, including the brilliant Carthaginian commander Hasdrubal, likely saw his methodical approach as weakness or indecision, attempting to provoke him into a rash engagement. But Scipio's equanimity was unshakable because his focus was on the ultimate victory, not on winning every minor skirmish or silencing every critic. His patience and strategic calm eventually paid off at the Battle of Illyricum, where his innovative tactics led to a stunning victory that effectively ended Carthaginian control in Spain. His refusal to be provoked into a premature fight is a masterclass in Stoic equanimity. He understood that true power often lies in waiting for the right moment to act, not in reacting to every challenge. Now, bring this expansive perspective down to the level of your own daily life. Think about a current conflict or source of irritation that feels overwhelming right now: an ongoing dispute with a neighbor, a tense rivalry with a coworker, a recurring argument with a family member. In the heat of the moment, it can feel all-consuming, as if this issue is the most important thing in the world. This is where the Stoic exercise of temporal distancing becomes an incredibly practical tool. Project yourself forward in time 1 full year from today. Look back at this present conflict from that future vantage point. How much will this specific argument truly matter in the grand scheme of your life? Will the details of who said what still sting with the same intensity? Or will the entire episode have faded into insignificance, perhaps even forgotten altogether, replaced by far more meaningful events and accomplishments? This simple act of mental time travel can instantly shrink the problem down to its true size, draining it of its emotional charge and allowing you to respond to it not as a crisis, but as a minor event on a much larger timeline. Your quiet, calm response in the present is no longer about losing a battle. It becomes an investment in the long-term peace and focus you wish to enjoy. Stoic self-examination helps ensure your quiet response comes from strength, not fear. This practice, often called the evening review, is far more than just replaying the day's events in your mind. It is a disciplined and honest audit of your own soul, a methodical process of holding your actions and reactions up to the clear light of reason to see if they truly aligned with your deepest values. When you choose to respond quietly in a tense situation, this introspection allows you to discern your true motive. Was your silence a powerful, strategic choice rooted in self-control and virtue? Or was it actually a passive retreat, driven by a fear of conflict or a desire to avoid discomfort? This crucial distinction is what separates Stoic composure from mere suppression. Self-examination is the tool that ensures your quietness is an expression of mastered power, not unprocessed weakness. Epictetus, who placed immense importance on this daily ritual, gave his students very specific instructions. He advised them to ask themselves each night not just what they did, but how they did it. He said, "Let sleep not come upon thy tender eyes until you have reviewed every deed of the day. Where did I go wrong? What did I do? What duties left undone?" Start there. Notice the order of his questions. He doesn't start with, "What did I achieve?" He begins with, "Where did I go wrong?" This isn't about cultivating guilt. It's about fostering radical honesty and a commitment to incremental improvement. The goal is to identify the moments where you assented to a harmful impression, where you reacted from ego instead of responding from virtue, so that you can consciously choose differently tomorrow. This nightly review is how you sand down the rough edges of your character, gradually shaping yourself into someone who is less and less disturbed by external events and more capable of that profound, quiet strength. Imagine a personal scenario where this practice transforms a recurring communication breakdown. You have a close friend who has a habit of making sarcastic jokes at your expense in group settings. For years, your pattern has been to either laugh along uncomfortably, stuffing down your irritation, or to occasionally snap back with a sharp remark that leads to a tense, awkward moment for everyone. Both responses leave you feeling resentful and powerless. One evening, during your self-examination, you reflect on the latest instance. You ask yourself Epictetus's questions. You went wrong by not addressing the pattern directly. You acted from a place of fear of being seen as too sensitive or fear of creating conflict. The duty left undone was the duty to your own self-respect and to the integrity of the friendship. This reflection isn't an exercise in self-flagellation, it's a strategic planning session. It leads you to realize that a truly virtuous, quiet response isn't laughing along or snapping back. It's choosing a calm, private moment to have an honest conversation. The next time you see your friend, you're prepared. You pull them aside and say with genuine calm, "I value our friendship and our banter, but when the jokes are about me in front of others, it stings. I know you don't mean harm, and I'd appreciate it if we could keep the ribbing to things we both find funny." This response, born from nightly introspection, is quiet, clear, and powerful. It comes from a place of strength and respect, not fear or anger, and it stands a far greater chance of strengthening the friendship than any reactive response ever could. The beauty of this practice is its profound simplicity and immediate applicability. You don't need any special tools or training to begin tonight. Before you go to sleep, simply take 5 minutes of quiet time. Mentally walk back through your day, but do it with a specific focus on your communications and reactions. When did you feel your temper flare? Why was the trigger truly the other person's words, or was it your own unexamined story about what those words meant? When you chose to stay quiet, what was the motivation behind that silence? Was it a strategic pause, or was it an avoidance of a difficult but necessary conversation? There's no need for judgment during this review. Treat it like a scientist neutrally analyzing data. The goal is simply to learn to understand your own patterns a little better and to make a gentle plan for a more virtuous response tomorrow. This daily habit of looking inward is the surest path to ensuring that the quietness you project to the world is a fortress of inner strength, not a mask for unexamined fear. Sometimes your posture speaks louder than your words. The Stoics understood this principle with profound clarity, recognizing that the way we carry our physical form through the world is not just a reflection of our inner state, but an active force that shapes our interactions and influences those around us. Long before modern psychology coined terms like power posing, these ancient philosophers were meticulously practicing what they called a philosophical, bearing a conscious cultivation of physical composure that projects inner stability and virtue. They believed that mastering your external demeanor was a direct extension of mastering your internal judgments, a visible manifestation of the discipline you apply to your thoughts. In the heat of conflict, this becomes an incredibly potent tool. A calm, steady posture and a measured gaze can communicate volumes of unshakable confidence, often disarming an opponent's aggression before a single word is even exchanged. Your body, in its stillness, becomes a silent argument for your own self-possession. Marcus Aurelius, who constantly navigated the treacherous waters of imperial politics and military command, frequently turned his attention to this very subject in his private meditations. He reminded himself to carry his soul with a certain grace and dignity regardless of the external chaos. He wrote, "Let every impulse and every action be directed to a social end, for that is what your nature demands. Let your every action and movement, and even your every silence, be worthy of a citizen." This instruction goes far beyond mere etiquette. He is advocating for a holistic integrity where even your non-verbal presence, the way you stand, the expression you wear, the silence you hold, is in alignment with your rational, social nature. It's about making your entire being, from your innermost thoughts to your outermost bearing, a coherent statement of virtue. This dignified carriage isn't for vanity. It is a form of respect for yourself and for the shared humanity of everyone you encounter, including your adversaries. Imagine a scenario where this principle diffuses a volatile situation. A store manager is confronted by an irate customer who is shouting, gesticulating wildly, and causing a scene in front of other patrons. The manager's heart might be racing, and the natural, fear-based impulse could be to match the customer's energy, to raise her own voice, to stand defensively with crossed arms, to lean forward into the confrontation. These are the universal primate signals of escalation, but instead she consciously employs stoic bearing. She takes a subtle but deep breath to center herself. She uncrosses her arms and lets them rest calmly at her sides, a posture that is open and non-threatening. She maintains soft but steady eye contact, and she allows the customer to exhaust their initial outburst without interrupting. Her facial expression remains neutral, not agreeing with the tirade but not mirroring the anger either. This calm, collected physical presence does something remarkable. The customer, whose anger was feeding on the expectation of a fight, suddenly finds no reciprocal energy. The manager's silent, dignified composure creates a palpable space of calm that the customer's anger cannot penetrate. The shouting begins to feel foolish and out of place. The customer's volume inevitably drops, their posture relaxes slightly, and the interaction can then transition into a more rational, problem-solving conversation. The conflict was disarmed not by a clever verbal rebuttal, but by the manager's command of her own non-verbal field. This power is available to you in every interaction, from boardroom negotiations to kitchen table disagreements. For the next 24 hours, I invite you to become a quiet observer of your own physicality, especially in moments of slight stress or tension. The next time you receive a frustrating email, notice what happens to your body. Do your shoulders hike up toward your ears? Does your jaw clench? When you're in a discussion and you feel your opinion being challenged, do you lean forward aggressively or perhaps shrink back defensively? Just notice these cues without judgment, then experiment with a simple reset. If you're sitting, feel your feet flat on the floor and consciously relax your shoulders down your back. If you're standing, ensure your weight is evenly distributed, grounding yourself. This isn't about striking a fake, powerful pose. It's about returning to a state of natural, calm alignment. In doing so, you are not just managing your stress, you are actively broadcasting a signal of composure to everyone around you, a signal that can quietly neutralize aggression and command a deeper, more respectful form of attention. Humility allows you to respond quietly because you don't need to prove anything. This Stoic virtue is often mistaken for weakness or self-deprecation, but in practice, it is a profound source of strength and peace. True humility, in the Stoic sense, is simply an accurate assessment of reality, a clear-eyed recognition that you are a fallible human being, capable of error, and that your perspective is not the only one that matters. When you embrace this honest self-awareness, you free yourself from the exhausting burden of having to be right all the time, of having to defend your image, or of having to win every minor skirmish. Your ego, which is often the loudest voice in any conflict, quiets down. This creates a spaciousness within you, a calm center from which you can choose responses that de-escalate tension and foster understanding, rather than reactions that amplify discord just to protect your pride. Seneca, with his piercing insight into human nature, exposed the fragile foundation of pride that so often leads us into unnecessary battles. He wrote, "It is the fault of an uneducated person to blame others for their own failures, of a semi-educated person to blame themselves, and of a well-educated person to blame no one at all." This progression beautifully illustrates the Stoic path toward humility. The uneducated person is entirely external, blaming everyone else and thus constantly in conflict. The semi-educated person turns the blame inward, which is still a form of egocentricity, but the well-educated, wise person, the truly humble person, transcends the entire framework of blame. They understand that fault-finding is often a prideful game, a way to assign superiority or inferiority. The humble person simply sees what is, learns from it, and focuses on what can be done next to move forward constructively. This refusal to play the blame game is what makes a quiet, peaceful resolution possible. Consider a common example from the workplace that could easily spiral into a prolonged, toxic dispute. Two colleagues are collaborating on a project with a tight deadline. A crucial error is discovered in the final report just before it's due, an error that originated from a miscalculation in the data you provided. The immediate, prideful reaction would be to become defensive. You might look for a way to shift the blame, perhaps pointing out that your colleague was responsible for the final review, or you might minimize the error to protect your own sense of competence. This defensive posture guarantees conflict. It forces your colleague to become defensive in return, and the conversation instantly becomes about assigning fault rather than solving the problem. Now apply Stoic humility. You take a moment to honestly assess your role. You then approach your colleague and say, "I've found an error in the data I sent over, and it's my fault. I'm sorry, this puts us in a tight spot, but I've already started rerunning the numbers and I'll have a corrected version to you within the hour. What's the best way we can get this back on track?" This response, grounded in humility, is disarming. It completely eliminates the need for your colleague to attack you because you have already taken responsibility. It transforms the interaction from a potential fight into a partnership focused on a solution. The conflict evaporates because you have refused to let your pride become an obstacle to peace and progress. This practice invites a simple but powerful shift in perspective toward your most important relationships. Bring to mind one relationship where conversations tend to get stuck in cycles of defensiveness or misunderstanding. It might be with a partner, a parent, a child, or a close friend. Now ask yourself with genuine curiosity, where might my pride or my need to be seen as right be actively preventing a more peaceful connection? Is there a recurring argument where I cling to my position because admitting any fault feels like losing? The goal of this reflection isn't to heap blame upon yourself, but to identify one specific, small opportunity where an act of humility could serve as a key to unlock a better dynamic. It might be as simple as being the first to say, "You know, I've been thinking about what you said, and I think I misunderstood your point," or "I realize my tone was harsh earlier, and that wasn't fair." These small admissions require courage, but they demonstrate a strength far greater than any argument you could win. They signal that the relationship itself is more valuable to you than the victory of your ego, and that is a quiet power that very few conflicts can withstand. Insults only have power if you grant them authority over you. This is the simple yet transformative truth at the heart of the Stoic approach to handling criticism and verbal attacks. The Stoics drew a crucial distinction between an external event, someone uttering certain words, and the internal judgment we attach to that event, which is where the real pain is manufactured. The sound waves themselves cannot harm your character or your virtue. Only your agreement with the insult's message can create that disturbance. Your true self, your reasoned choice, and your moral purpose remain entirely untouched by anyone's opinion, no matter how loudly or cruelly it is delivered. To respond with quiet grace, therefore, is not to pretend the words weren't said, but to demonstrate through your composure that you have found them unworthy of your emotional engagement. You treat them as you would the rain, an external circumstance you might notice, but that you have no reason to take personally or fight against. Epictetus, who knew more than most about enduring hardship with dignity, offered perhaps the most direct guidance on this matter. He stated plainly, "If someone speaks badly of you, do not defend yourself against the accusations, but reply, 'Obviously, he did not know my other faults, or he would have mentioned them as well.'" This advice is often misunderstood as a form of self-deprecation, but it is actually a masterclass in cognitive reframing. Epictetus isn't suggesting you actually believe you are full of faults. He is providing a mental tool to instantly drain the insult of its intended sting. By humorously agreeing and amplifying, you completely refuse to play the game. You show that you are not invested in managing that person's opinion of you, and that your self-worth is derived from your own internal scorecard, not from their external critique. Your calm reply, or even your serene silence, communicates that their attempt to assign you a negative value has failed because you do not recognize their authority to grade you. A powerful historical example of this principle in action is found in the life of Eleanor Roosevelt, one of the most publicly scrutinized figures of the 20th century. As First Lady and later as a diplomat, she was a constant target for vitriolic criticism, sexist attacks, and outright slander from political opponents and the press. Cartoons depicted her unflatteringly, columnists questioned her motives, and radio hosts mocked her voice and ideas. Through it all, she maintained a profound and visible equanimity. She famously advised, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent," a sentiment that is pure Stoicism in modern language. She did not spend her energy issuing furious denials or engaging in public feuds. Instead, she channeled that energy into relentless action, advocating for human rights, writing her newspaper column, and traveling to support troops during the war. By refusing to be knocked off her purposeful path by the slings and arrows of criticism, she rendered the insults powerless. Her opponent's words did not disappear, but they became mere background noise, unable to halt her work or shake her core commitment to her causes. Her quiet endurance in the face of relentless noise became a testament to her strength, ultimately amplifying her impact and legacy far more than any defensive reaction ever could. This practice invites you to conduct a simple but liberating experiment in your own life. The next time you encounter unfounded criticism, whether it's a snide remark from a relative, a passive-aggressive comment from a coworker, or a nasty online message, make a conscious choice to simply let it land and then let it go. Do not craft the perfect rebuttal in your mind. Do not replay the words over and over, feeding them with your attention. Instead, mentally label it for what it is. That is an external event. Those are words that reflect the other person's state of mind, not my worth. See if you can find even a small amount of curiosity about what might be driving their need to insult, which shifts your focus from being a victim to being an observer. This doesn't mean you tolerate abuse. It means you protect your peace by not internalizing it. Each time you successfully practice this, you strengthen your mental immune system. You reinforce the profound truth that your character is yours to define, and that no one else has the remote control to your inner peace unless you willingly hand it over. True listening is a Stoic act of patience and presence, a deliberate exercise in setting aside your own internal commentary to fully receive what another person is attempting to communicate. In our daily interactions, we often listen not to understand, but to prepare our rebuttal. Our minds are busy crafting a defense, formulating a better point, or silently judging the speaker's logic, which means we are only partially present. The Stoic approach to listening flips this dynamic entirely. It transforms the act of hearing from a passive or strategic activity into an active virtue, a practice of cognitive generosity where you offer your full attention as a gift. This kind of deep, mindful listening is one of the most powerful ways to foster quieter responses because it fundamentally changes the data you are working with. When you truly hear the nuances, the emotions, and the intentions behind someone's words, you are far less likely to react to a superficial misinterpretation. You respond to reality, not to your own distorted projection of it. Marcus Aurelius provided timeless guidance on this very practice, advising himself to cultivate a mindset free from premature judgment. He wrote, "To listen to another's words without being carried away by your own impressions is a skill." This is the cornerstone of Stoic listening. He isn't suggesting we become blank slates or agree with everything we hear. He is urging us to create a mental space where we can receive the complete message before we allow our own biases, insecurities, or opinions to filter and distort it. Your own impressions are the automatic interpretations that leap to mind the story that someone is attacking you, belittling you, or being foolish. Mindful listening asks you to suspend those impressions just for a few moments to allow the other person's truth to land fully. This suspension is an act of immense self-control and empathy, and it is the prerequisite for any response that is both quiet and wise. Imagine a conversation between two business partners, Sarah and Ben, who are discussing the rocky launch of a new product. Ben, feeling stressed about the financial investment, starts the meeting by saying, "The marketing strategy for the launch was completely misaligned with our target audience." Sarah, who had led the marketing efforts, feels the immediate hot sting of that comment. Her automatic impression is one of blame and personal failure. If she reacts from that place, she might become defensive, listing all the reasons the strategy should have worked and shifting blame to product development or sales. This would instantly create a defensive, adversarial dynamic. Instead, Sarah practices Stoic mindful listening. She notices the urge to defend herself, but she chooses to set it aside. She focuses entirely on understanding Ben's perspective. She asks, "Can you help me understand what felt misaligned from your point of view?" She then listens, truly listens, without interrupting, her body language open and receptive. As Ben explains his concerns about the messaging and channels used, Sarah hears not an attack on her competence, but his deep anxiety about the company's future. Her quiet, attentive presence allows Ben to feel heard, which calms his own defensive energy. The conversation naturally shifts from a blame game to a collaborative problem-solving session. Her mindful listening didn't just prevent an argument. It built a bridge of mutual respect and transformed a potential conflict into a moment of strengthened partnership. This transformative power is something you can bring into your very next conversation, and it begins with a simple but profound commitment. The next time you find yourself in a discussion, especially one that feels even slightly tense, make it your single goal to listen without interrupting. This is harder than it sounds, as our minds are wired to jump in. When the other person pauses, consciously count to 2 in your head before you respond. Use that tiny silence not to plan your next point, but to ensure they have truly finished their thought. Pay as much attention to their body language and tone as you do to their words. See if you can mentally summarize their core message and emotion back to them before you offer your own perspective. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're feeling frustrated because X, and you're worried about Y. This practice of reflective listening accomplishes 2 things at once. It ensures you have understood correctly, eliminating misunderstandings before they can spark reactions, and it makes the other person feel profoundly heard, which dramatically lowers the emotional temperature of the entire exchange. In that calmer, clearer space, your response will naturally be quieter, more considered, and far more effective. It takes courage to choose silence over retaliation. In a world that often equates strength with loudness and dominance, the decision to remain quiet in the face of provocation can feel counterintuitive, even terrifying. We worry that our silence will be mistaken for cowardice, for submission, or for a lack of conviction. But Stoicism reframes this entirely, teaching that the highest form of courage is not the courage to attack, but the courage to exercise command over your own impulses. It is the bravery required to master the storm within yourself before you even think about trying to calm the storms around you. This inner mastery is what the Stoics called Andrea, or courage, a virtue that is demonstrated not by how much you can overpower others, but by how completely you can govern your own reactions, especially when every fiber of your being is screaming to fight back. Seneca, who explored the nature of courage in depth, drew a crucial distinction between the bravery of a soldier on the battlefield and the bravery of a sage in daily life. He wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." He wasn't talking about mere survival. He was pointing to the immense fortitude required to endure life's injustices, insults, and irritations without being corrupted by them, without losing your character to anger or bitterness. For Seneca, true bravery was found in endurance, in the ability to bear hardship with an unbroken spirit and a clear mind. This endurance isn't passive suffering, it is an active, resilient stance. It is the courage to absorb a blow without returning it, to withstand heat without catching fire, to hold your ground internally when everything external is pushing you to lose your balance. This is the Stoic courage that transforms quiet restraint from a seeming weakness into an undeniable display of strength. Consider a real-world scenario where this courage changes everything. A young police officer is on patrol when a visibly agitated individual begins shouting profanities directly in his face, spitting with rage, and challenging him to a fight. A crowd starts to gather, recording on their phones. The officer's training and every instinctual urge might push him toward a dominant, forceful response to establish control and authority, a response that could easily escalate into a physical confrontation. But this officer, drawing on a deeper well of courage, makes a different choice. He takes a subtle step back to create space, keeps his hands visible and relaxed at his sides, and maintains a calm, neutral expression. He lets the verbal tirade continue without interruption, offering only quiet, brief assurances. "I'm not here to fight you. I just want to make sure everyone is safe." His restraint requires immense courage. It means tolerating the intense discomfort of the insult, the professional risk of being perceived as weak by the crowd, and the personal challenge of overriding his own adrenaline. But by choosing this quiet response, he accomplishes what force never could. The agitator, deprived of the reciprocal anger he expected to fuel his rage, gradually begins to de-escalate. The potential for a violent, viral incident is completely neutralized. The officer's courage wasn't absent. It was redirected inward toward mastering his own reactions, and in doing so, he mastered the situation itself. Now turn this lens inward on your own experiences. Can you recall a specific moment when holding your tongue, when choosing not to engage in an argument, actually required more strength than unleashing your anger? It might not have been a dramatic public encounter. Perhaps it was during a tense family dinner when a relative made a pointed political comment designed to get a rise out of you. Maybe it was in a work meeting when a colleague took credit for your idea and you felt the sharp temptation to publicly correct them. Or perhaps it was online when a stranger left a cruel comment and the urge to craft a scathing reply felt overwhelming. In that moment of choice, what did it feel like to consciously swallow that reactive impulse, that internal tension, that feeling of exercising a muscle you didn't know you had? That was the feeling of Stoic courage. It was the bravery of prioritizing your long-term peace and your personal integrity over the short-lived, hollow satisfaction of a retaliatory strike. That feeling of strength in restraint is a signal, a confirmation that you are operating from a place of true virtue, proving to yourself that your actions are chosen, not merely triggered. Consistency in character makes your responses predictable in their goodness, disarming others. When you are unwaveringly anchored in your principles, you become like a steady lighthouse in a stormy sea. People know exactly what to expect from you, not because you are boring or rigid, but because you are reliably virtuous. This predictability is not a weakness, it is a profound strategic strength. An opponent who seeks to provoke you thrives on unpredictability. They throw an insult or a challenge into the water, hoping to create chaotic ripples they can then navigate to their advantage. But when your character is consistent, your response is a known quantity. It is calm, it is reasoned, and it is rooted in your values. This reliability removes the very tool of manipulation from their hands, leaving them with nothing to grasp. They cannot play on your emotions because your emotional state is governed by your character, not by their actions. Epictetus, who framed the entire Stoic journey as one of aligning with a rational and virtuous nature, spoke directly to this power of consistency. He taught that we should strive to live in accordance with nature, which for Stoics meant living with reason and virtue as our guiding forces. He suggested that when we do this, our lives become harmonious and simple, not because the external world is simple, but because our internal compass is unwavering. He said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. This is the blueprint for consistency. You decide ahead of time and with great clarity the kind of person you wish to be, perhaps someone who is patient, honest, and courageous. Then, in every situation that follows, you simply act as that person would act. There is no internal debate, no frantic recalculation based on who you're with or what you might gain. Your actions flow from a fixed center, and that very steadiness becomes a quiet, unassailable force that commands a deep and lasting respect. We can see this principle embodied in the leadership of someone like Fred Rogers, the host of the beloved children's television program. His public persona was not an act, it was a meticulous and deliberate extension of his private character. For decades, he presented the same calm, kind, and utterly consistent message of acceptance and emotional honesty to his audience. Critics and satirists sometimes tried to provoke him or mock his gentle demeanor, but they consistently failed. There was no inconsistency to exploit, no hidden hypocrisy to reveal. His response to any challenge or criticism was always the same, a thoughtful, gentle reaffirmation of his core belief in the inherent worth of every person. This unwavering consistency did not make him a pushover, it made him a fortress. Those who might have sought to attack him found their arrows simply bouncing off a wall of authentic, predictable goodness. His opponents didn't just lose power, they often lost their will to oppose him at all, disarmed by an integrity they could not dent. Think about your own interactions for a moment. Consider a relationship where there is tension or frequent misunderstanding. Now ask yourself, how much of that friction might be fueled by inconsistency? Do you sometimes react one way and another time react completely differently to the same type of provocation, perhaps based on your mood or your energy levels? This unpredictability, however human, is what an opponent, whether a difficult coworker or a fractious family member, learns to manipulate. They learn that if they push the right buttons on the right day, they can get a rise out of you. But imagine the transformative power of becoming consistent. Imagine responding to the same type of criticism with the same measured calm every single time. Imagine meeting gossip with the same gentle refusal to participate each occasion it arises. This consistency sends a clear and undeniable message. My peace is not yours to disrupt. My character is not yours to alter. It is a quiet, long-game strategy that slowly but surely rewrites the rules of engagement, transforming conflict into respect through the sheer power of dependable virtue. Stoics saw time as an ally in resolving conflicts peacefully, not as an enemy that demanded immediate, often regrettable, reactions. This perspective transforms patience from a passive state of waiting into an active, strategic virtue, a conscious choice to allow events to unfold at their own pace, trusting that clarity and resolution often emerge naturally when we step out of their way. For the Stoic, impatience is a form of arrogance, a belief that our hurried timeline is superior to the natural flow of events. It is the ego's frantic attempt to control the uncontrollable, to force a solution before its time, and in doing so, we often create more problems than we solve. Patience, by contrast, is the humble acknowledgement that some processes cannot be rushed, that people need time to reflect, and that emotions, like storms, must often simply be allowed to pass. This disciplined willingness to wait is what makes a quiet response so profoundly effective over the long term. It is the application of gentle, consistent pressure over time, rather than a single, forceful shove that meets immediate resistance. Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire perpetually on the brink of crisis, constantly reminded himself of this temporal perspective to maintain his composure. He wrote in his private meditations, "Remember that very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. And likewise, remember that each of us lives only in this present moment, a mere fragment of time. The rest is either past and gone or not yet seen." This reflection is a powerful antidote to impatience. It pulls our focus from an anxious future we cannot control and anchors it firmly in the present moment, the only point in time where we can actually exercise our virtue. By recognizing that most of our irritations are fleeting, momentary blips on the vast timeline of our lives, we shrink them down to their true size. The annoying comment, the delayed response, the stubborn disagreement. Viewed from this wider lens, they lose their urgency and their power to trigger us. This isn't about dismissing real problems, it's about seeing them in their proper proportion, which allows us to address them with calm purpose rather than panicked haste. Consider a common source of modern frustration that tries the patience of nearly everyone, a protracted, bureaucratic process. Imagine you've submitted an important application for a visa, a loan, or a professional license, and you're met with weeks of silence followed by a request for more documents, then more silence. The automatic, impatient reaction is to flood the office with angry calls and emails, to demand explanations from junior staff, to rant on social media. This reaction, while understandable, expends a tremendous amount of emotional energy and rarely speeds things up. In fact, it often slows the process by frustrating the very people trying to help you. Now apply the Stoic view of time. You acknowledge that the timeline is outside your control. You accept that the system moves at its own pace. This acceptance isn't resignation, it's strategic. It frees you to channel your energy into what you can control, double-checking that your responses are complete and error-free, setting gentle calendar reminders to follow up at reasonable intervals, and most importantly, maintaining your peace in the meantime. Your external communication becomes quiet, polite, and persistent rather than loud, aggressive, and frantic. This patient, steady approach is far more likely to be met with helpfulness from officials and preserves your mental energy for the things in your life that truly deserve it. The conflict with the faceless system is disarmed because you have refused to engage in a fight you cannot win on your terms, choosing instead to win the inner battle for your own equanimity. This practice invites you to conduct a simple experiment with one of your current frustrations. Identify something that is testing your patience right now, perhaps a slow-moving project at work, a family member who is taking their time to make a decision, or a personal goal that seems frustratingly out of reach. For the next week, make a conscious choice to release your attachment to your preferred timeline. Each time you feel the familiar itch of impatience arise, the urge to nag, to rush, to force a resolution, pause. Take a deep breath and mentally hand the timeline over to the natural order of things. Redirect the energy you would have spent on worrying or complaining into something entirely within your control, improving your own preparation, focusing on a different task, or simply enjoying a moment of stillness. Observe what happens. Does the situation feel less urgent? Does your relationship with the other person improve when the pressure is off? You may find that by practicing this Stoic patience, you haven't just managed a frustration. You have discovered a deeper, more enduring form of power that comes from aligning your rhythm with the patient, unfolding pace of life itself. Gratitude can shift your focus from what's wrong to what's still right. In the heat of a conflict or the midst of a personal setback, our attention naturally narrows to the source of our frustration, magnifying it until it seems to dominate our entire reality. This tunnel vision is a psychological trap, one that the Stoics understood well and sought to counteract with a deliberate practice of thankful reflection. By consciously directing our awareness toward the aspects of our lives that remain intact, positive, and worthy of appreciation, we perform a subtle but powerful act of cognitive recalibration. We are not denying the problem or pretending it doesn't hurt. We are simply choosing to widen the lens through which we view our current circumstances. This expanded perspective doesn't make the adversity disappear, but it dramatically reduces its perceived size and emotional weight, creating the mental space necessary for a quieter, more reasoned response. Seneca, who experienced exile, chronic illness, and the volatile politics of imperial Rome, wrote extensively about this anchoring power of gratitude. In one of his letters, he advises, "Let us cherish and love old age, for it is full of pleasure if one knows how to use it. Fruits are most welcome when almost over. Youth is most charming at its close. The last drink delights the intoxicated, the glass which souses them and puts the finishing touch on their drunkenness." At first glance, this might seem like an odd metaphor for gratitude, but Seneca's point is profound. The highest appreciation often comes not from abundance, but from the mindful recognition of value as things become scarce. When we apply this to adversity, it transforms our relationship with it. The practice of gratitude is the mental equivalent of savoring that last, delightful drink. It is the conscious choice to find and appreciate the good that still exists, even and especially when challenges arise. This thankful reflection is a direct antidote to the emotional intensity of a conflict, because it is impossible to feel truly victimized and genuinely grateful at the exact same moment. One emotion will always eclipse the other. Imagine a scenario that could easily spiral into a days-long family feud. You've organized a large outdoor gathering to celebrate a relative's birthday, investing significant time, money, and emotional hope into making it perfect. An hour before guests are set to arrive, a sudden, torrential downpour ruins all your meticulous outdoor arrangements. The immediate, raw reaction is one of sheer frustration and disappointment. You might feel the urge to blame the weather forecast, to complain loudly, or to snap at family members who suggest moving the party indoors in a cramped, messy space. This reaction, while understandable, sets a tense, negative tone that will infect the entire event. Now, apply the Stoic practice of gratitude. Instead of fixating on the ruined plans, you take a moment, just 60 seconds, to consciously list reasons for thankfulness. You are grateful that the rain held off long enough for you to get the food prepared outdoors. You are grateful that you have a home to move into, that your family is healthy and present to celebrate, and that the birthday relative is still with you to be honored. This shift in focus doesn't change the weather, but it completely changes your emotional landscape. From this place of gratitude, your response to the crisis becomes quiet, practical, and even cheerful. You might say, "Well, it's cozy inside, let's all pitch in and move this party where it's dry." The most important thing is that we're all together. This grateful perspective is contagious. It disarms the potential for collective grumbling and transforms a disaster into a memorable, bonding experience. The adversity loses its power to disturb your peace because you have actively chosen to anchor yourself in what is right rather than what is wrong. This simple practice holds transformative power that you can test for yourself in your very next moment of tension. The next time you find yourself in the beginning stages of a conflict or facing a sharp disappointment, I invite you to press the pause button on your reaction. Before you speak or act, challenge yourself to mentally identify 3 specific things you are genuinely grateful for in that very moment. They don't have to be monumental. They can be simple and immediate. Perhaps you are grateful for the chair you are sitting in that supports you, for the ability to hear and understand the other person's perspective even if you disagree, or for the simple fact that you have the capacity to feel strongly because it means you care. This is not about ignoring the problem, it is about properly contextualizing it. By forcibly widening your perspective to include gratitude, you drain the immediate conflict of its overwhelming urgency, and you will find that your subsequent response comes from a place of grounded calm rather than reactive emotion. Stoicism reminds us that we are all part of a common human community. This isn't a sentimental notion but a fundamental principle of Stoic physics and ethics called sympatheia, the belief that the entire universe is a single, interconnected, living organism, and we are all parts of it, much like individual cells in a vast body. When we internalize this perspective, it fundamentally rewires how we perceive conflict. The person opposing us is no longer a separate entity to be conquered. They are another expression of the same rational nature that we possess, another thread in the same universal fabric. This realization systematically dismantles the us versus them mentality that fuels so much hostility and aggression. We begin to see that an attack on another is, in a very real sense, an attack on a part of ourselves, and that a victory achieved through humiliation or domination is a hollow one that weakens the whole. This shift from separation to connection is what allows for quieter, more compassionate responses, because your goal is no longer to defeat an opponent, but to realign a fellow human being who has lost their way. Marcus Aurelius consistently returned to this idea to ground himself during times of immense political and military pressure. He wrote in his Meditations, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." This simple analogy captures the essence of Stoic interdependence. Your personal well-being is inextricably linked to the health of the community around you. Engaging in bitter, reactive arguments might feel like a personal victory for your ego, but if it poisons the communal hive, your family, your workplace, your circle of friends, it ultimately harms you as well. Aurelius also advised himself to frequently consider that the person who wrongs him is still his kin, not because he shares the same blood or seed, but because he shares the same mind and a portion of the divine. This isn't about excusing bad behavior, it's about changing the lens through which you view it. When you see someone's harmful actions as a failure of their reason, a kind of spiritual illness rather than pure malice, your response can shift from retaliation to a more compassionate, clinical desire to help restore balance, even if that simply means calmly refusing to engage with the illness on its own terms. A powerful modern example of this principle in action comes from the field of restorative justice, a process that prioritizes healing and reconciliation over punishment. In one documented case, a teenager who had vandalized a community center was brought face to face with the elderly volunteers whose hard work he had destroyed. The initial dynamic was pure us versus them, the angry, defensive young man versus the hurt and frustrated community members. The facilitator, applying a process deeply aligned with Stoic philosophy, guided the conversation away from blame and towards shared humanity. They asked the teen to explain not just what he did, but what was happening in his life that led him to that point. They asked the volunteers to express not just their anger, but their feelings of betrayal and their hopes for the center. As each side listened to the other's struggles, the teen's feelings of alienation and lack of purpose, the volunteers' fears that their community was crumbling, the hard lines of opposition began to soften. They weren't just an offender and victims anymore. They were a struggling young person and a group of struggling older people, all part of the same community, all wanting to feel safe and valued. The quiet, empathetic space created by this recognition allowed for a transformative resolution. Instead of jail time, the teen worked at the center to repair the damage, and in doing so, found a sense of belonging and purpose he had been lacking. The conflict was resolved not by one side overpowering the other, but by both sides remembering their fundamental interconnection. This practice invites you to conduct a simple but profound thought experiment with someone you currently view as an opponent. It could be a political figure you disagree with, a difficult colleague, or even a family member you're locked in a cold war with. Instead of focusing on their opinions or actions that you find objectionable, make a conscious effort to mentally sketch their humanity. Wonder about their life, what fears might be driving their behavior, what personal losses or hardships might have shaped their worldview, what loves and hopes do they hold that are probably not so different from your own. You don't need to agree with them or condone their actions. The goal is simply to practice seeing them as a complex, flawed human being, a fellow passenger on the same difficult journey, rather than as a caricature or an obstacle. The next time you interact with them, carry this expanded perspective with you. See if it allows you to listen more deeply, to respond with a calmer tone, or to simply withhold a reactive comment that would have only deepened the divide. In that small space of recognition, you aren't just resolving a conflict, you are actively strengthening the interconnected web that you yourself depend on for your own peace and well-being. When you desire less from others, you react less to their actions. This is the profound, practical power of the Stoic discipline of desire, a practice that systematically reduces your dependency on external validation, and in doing so, makes you nearly immune to provocation. Most of our emotional turbulence in communication doesn't actually stem from what other people say or do. It erupts from the gap between our expectations and reality. We desire a certain outcome. We want to be praised, understood, agreed with, or respected. When the other person fails to meet that unspoken desire, we experience friction, the spark that ignites defensiveness, anger, or hurt. The Stoic approach invites us to turn this dynamic inside out. Instead of trying to control the uncontrollable actions of others to satisfy our desires, we do the far more efficient work of examining and moderating the desires themselves. By wanting less from the external world, we automatically have less to lose, and our inner peace becomes self-sustaining rather than contingent on others. Epictetus, who dedicated his life to teaching mental freedom, placed this discipline at the very core of his philosophy. He draws a clear, unbreakable line between what is within our control and what is not. He instructs us, freedom is secured not by the fulfilling of men's desires, but by the removal of desire. This is a radical statement. He isn't advocating for a life of apathy or without goals. He is pointing to the mechanism of our own imprisonment. We chain ourselves to people and outcomes we cannot command. The desire for a promotion, for a partner to always be thoughtful, for a colleague to be fair. These are all wishes directed at external things, and thus they are inherently fragile. Epictetus teaches us to limit our chief desires to what is truly our own, our judgments, our impulses, our efforts, and our character. When your primary desire is simply to act with virtue and integrity in any given interaction, you have placed your happiness in a vault that no one else can break into. You can enter any conversation free from the anxiety of needing a specific result, and that freedom is what allows for truly quiet, composed responses. Imagine a scenario where this shift in desire transforms a potentially explosive interaction. You've worked tirelessly on a proposal for a client, and you're finally in the meeting to present it. You have a deep, hidden desire for them to be not just satisfied, but impressed and effusive with their praise. This desire makes you nervous and overly eager. Halfway through your presentation, the lead client interrupts with a skeptical question, pointing out a potential flaw. If your emotional state is dependent on your desire for their approval, this comment feels like a personal rejection. You might become flustered, defensive, or start over-explaining in a way that comes across as insecure. Now, replay that same scenario with the Stoic discipline of desire. Before the meeting, you consciously examine your expectations. You remind yourself that your desire should not be for their praise, which is outside your control, but to present your work clearly and honestly, which is entirely within your control. You go into the meeting wanting only to do your best. When the skeptical question comes, it doesn't land as a threat to your need for validation. It's simply a piece of data. You can receive it calmly, thank them for the feedback, and answer thoughtfully. Your quiet, assured response in the face of criticism will do more to build their confidence in you than any desperate plea for approval ever could. By wanting the right thing, to be virtuous in your conduct, you became more effective. This practice becomes incredibly powerful when applied to the small, daily disappointments that cumulatively drain our energy. Think about the last time you felt irritated because a friend was late to meet you, or a family member forgot to do a chore they promised to handle. That irritation is a direct product of a desire. The desire for them to act in accordance with your schedule or your expectations. The Stoic question is, did you ever truly have command over their actions? The frustration is the price you pay for desiring something that was never yours to hold. Now consider the peace that becomes available when you release that specific desire. You can still prefer that people be punctual or reliable. These are called preferred indifference in Stoicism. But when you stop needing it, when you stop building your emotional well-being on the assumption that it will happen, you free yourself. If they are late, it is merely an external event to be accommodated, not a personal affront to be reacted to. Your response can be a calm, "No problem, I got some reading done," rather than a tense, silent treatment that poisons the rest of your time together. Now bring this concept down to a single, actionable choice. What is one specific desire you are holding onto that you could practice releasing just for today? It doesn't have to be a monumental life goal. It could be the desire for your teenager to put their dishes in the dishwasher without being asked, for your boss to recognize your effort on a specific project, or for a stranger on the internet to agree with your comment. Pick one. For the next 24 hours, make it your intentional practice to want that specific thing less. Each time you feel the familiar tug of that expectation, mentally loosen your grip on it. Remind yourself that this outcome belongs to the vast category of things outside your command. Notice what happens to your internal state. Does a potential trigger lose its power? Does a conversation feel lighter because you have less riding on it? This isn't about giving up on people or lowering your standards. It's about raising the standard for your own inner peace and making it independent of anyone else's behavior. In that space of released desire, you will find a profound and quiet strength that no external event can ever take from you. Your quiet response can set a new standard for those around you. This isn't about being a passive bystander. It's about becoming an active architect of your social environment through the power of embodied virtue. The Stoics understood that human beings are deeply social creatures, wired for mimicry and influenced by the emotional tones and behaviors of those in their vicinity. When you choose to respond to provocation with unshakable calm, you are not just managing your own state. You are broadcasting a powerful, non-verbal signal that subtly recalibrates the entire group's expectations for what is possible. Your composure becomes a living invitation for others to rise to that same standard, offering them a template for a different, more peaceful way of engaging. This is leadership in its most authentic form, not by command or control, but by the irresistible influence of a well-ordered soul. Seneca captured this profound social influence with elegant simplicity when he wrote, "A great example is the best way to give advice." Notice he doesn't say that a great speech or a clever argument is the best way. He points to the raw, undeniable power of a lived example. Your actions, and particularly your non-actions in the face of chaos, communicate more clearly than any lecture ever could. You are essentially saying, through your bearing alone, look, it is possible to be challenged and not crumble. It is possible to be insulted and not retaliate. Peace is not a distant ideal. It is a choice I am making right now, and you can make it too. This kind of influence operates on a subconscious level, bypassing people's defensive reasoning and speaking directly to their innate capacity for emulation. Your quietness doesn't just protect you, it becomes a gift to everyone witnessing it, a demonstration of a better way. Consider the dynamic of a typical tense workplace meeting. The project is behind schedule, the budget is overrun, and the pressure is mounting. One team member, let's call him David, starts to voice a concern, but his anxiety quickly morphs into personal criticism, targeting a colleague's performance. The energy in the room instantly becomes charged and hostile. Other team members, feeling the discomfort, might either shrink into silence or jump into the fray to defend themselves or others, escalating the conflict. Now imagine one person, Sarah, chooses a different path. She doesn't interrupt David. She listens intently, her posture relaxed and open, her breathing steady. When he finishes, she doesn't immediately fire back. She allows a moment of potent silence to hang in the air, absorbing the tension rather than reflecting it. Then she speaks not about the attack but about the underlying issue. Her voice is measured and calm as she says, "I hear the frustration about the timeline, David." That's a real pressure we're all feeling. Perhaps we could focus our energy on the specific roadblock we're hitting with the vendor communication. Sarah's calm is not passive. It is an active force that changes the gravitational pull of the entire room. Her refusal to be baited into an emotional reaction creates a safe space for others to disengage from the conflict. The meeting, which was seconds away from devolving into a blame session, is gently but firmly guided back to productive problem solving. Sarah's quiet leadership didn't require a title or authority. It required only her command of herself, and in exercising that command, she gave everyone else permission to do the same. This ripple effect extends far beyond the boardroom and into every facet of our lives. Your calm demeanor in a long grocery line can soothe the impatience of those around you. Your refusal to engage in gossip at a family gathering can quietly elevate the conversation. Your measured response to a child's tantrum teaches emotional regulation not through punishment but through modeling. Every interaction is an opportunity to cast a stone into the water, creating circles of influence that spread out far wider than we can often see. The Stoic goal is to become so consistent in this practice that your very presence becomes a calming influence, a touchstone of stability that others unconsciously orient themselves around. Now bring this awareness to your own sphere of influence. Take a moment to consider the various environments you move through each day: your home, your workplace, your social circles. In which of these spaces does the emotional tone feel most fragile or reactive? See if you can identify one specific situation where you typically feel drawn into the drama or the negativity. How might your own shift toward a more stoic, quiet response begin to alter that environment? You don't need to make a grand announcement or try to change anyone else. The work is entirely internal. The next time you enter that space, make it your single intention to be the calmest person there. Observe what happens not to others, but to your own sense of power and peace. Then notice if the quality of the interactions around you begins, ever so slightly, to change. Your example is a light. You may never know how far its beam reaches, but you can always choose to keep it shining steadily. Mastering the quietest response is a daily practice, not a one-time event. It's the accumulation of small, deliberate choices made consistently over time that gradually rewires your instincts and builds an unshakable foundation of inner calm. The Stoics weren't theoretical philosophers. They were eminently practical, designing specific exercises to be woven into the fabric of daily life. These practices are the training ground where you build the mental muscle required to remain composed when it matters most. Think of it not as adding more to your to-do list, but as a subtle shift in how you approach your existing routines, transforming mundane moments into opportunities for profound self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius, despite the unimaginable burdens of leading an empire, never neglected this daily work. He underscored the power of incremental progress, writing, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life, now take what's left and live it properly." While this sounds stark, its purpose is intensely practical. It's a call to stop postponing your commitment to virtue and to start investing fully in the present day, because that is all we truly ever have. He reminds us that a life of principle is built not through grand, sweeping declarations, but through the small, consistent actions we take each morning, each afternoon, and each night. It is the quiet victory of choosing a breath over a barb, a pause over a provocation, again and again, until it becomes your natural state of being. A powerful way to embed this into your life is to establish two bookend rituals, a morning preparation and an evening review. Upon waking, instead of immediately reaching for your phone and absorbing the world's chaos, grant yourself just 5 minutes of stillness. Sit quietly and preview the day ahead. Mentally walk through your schedule and identify potential challenges: a difficult conversation, a tedious task, a person who often tests your patience. Rather than meeting these events with dread, see them as opportunities to practice your Stoic principles. Set a simple intention. Today, when I feel the urge to interrupt, I will practice listening. When I receive criticism, I will look for the kernel of truth before defending myself. This isn't about scripting your day, but about priming your mind to respond virtuously instead of reacting impulsively. Then, as your day concludes, dedicate another 5 minutes to a gentle review. This is not an exercise in self-criticism, but a neutral audit, like a scientist reviewing data. Ask yourself Epictetus's 3 questions. Where did I go right today? Where did I allow an external to disturb my peace? What could I do better tomorrow? Perhaps you successfully paused before sending an angry email, which is a victory to be acknowledged. Maybe you snapped at a cashier because you were rushed, which is simply a data point to learn from. The goal is to identify the gap between your intention and your action without judgment, and to make a calm plan for narrowing that gap tomorrow. This daily cycle of preparation and reflection creates a powerful feedback loop that steadily cultivates the quiet strength you seek. To make this tangible, imagine a specific routine. Your alarm goes off. You take 3 deep breaths before your feet even touch the floor. As you brush your teeth, you contemplate one Stoic quote you've written on your mirror. During your commute, instead of listening to frantic news, you listen to nothing, using the time to mentally rehearse staying calm in your first meeting. Throughout the day, you use your phone's reminder function not for tasks but for virtues: a chime at 11 a.m. that simply says pause, and another at 3 p.m. that asks what is within my control. In the evening, you jot down 2 sentences in a journal, one thing you're grateful for and one instance where you exercised restraint. This isn't a rigid program. It's a tapestry of small prompts that keep your focus on your inner world amidst the outer noise. The sheer simplicity of this is what makes it so profound. You don't need to retreat to a mountain monastery to live like a Stoic. You can practice it in the checkout line, during a staff meeting, or while helping your child with homework. The invitation is to start not with everything, but with one single, manageable thing. Which of these practices resonates most with where you are right now? Is it the morning moment of stillness, the evening review, or perhaps it's the commitment to insert one deliberate pause before you speak in your conversations tomorrow? Choose just one, make it your own, Anchor your day with that single practice and observe how that small, consistent action begins to quietly transform the quality of your responses and the peace of your mind. Throughout our exploration, we've journeyed across the core Stoic principles that empower the quietest response, uncovering how true power isn't seized from others but cultivated within through unwavering self-command. We began by understanding that our greatest strength lies in our inner sovereignty, the conscious choice to govern our reactions rather than being governed by external events, as Epictetus taught us by focusing solely on what is within our control. We then dismantled the illusion that opponents hold any real power over us, recognizing with Seneca that their influence is merely a performance that requires our emotional engagement to sustain itself. We discovered the profound clarity that comes from cognitive detachment, learning to see events from a higher perspective as Marcus Aurelius advised, stripping away the personal narratives that so often trigger our defensiveness. We equipped ourselves with the practical superpower of the pause, that vital breath between impulse and action where our freedom truly resides, and we reframed silence not as a passive surrender, but as an active, strategic choice that denies aggression the reaction it seeks to fuel itself. We mastered the art of managing our perceptions, understanding that events themselves are neutral and only our judgments assign them emotional power, and we embraced the liberating practice of Stoic acceptance, which allows us to stop fighting reality and instead channel our energy into virtuous action. We prepared for adversity through negative visualization, inoculating ourselves against the shock of misfortune, and we cultivated an unshakable inner stillness that serves as an anchor amidst any external chaos. We practiced the discipline of assent, learning to withhold our agreement from provocative impressions until we could examine them with reason, and we embraced temperance as purposeful restraint, aligning our expressions with our values rather than our impulses. We employed empathy as a tool to see the shared humanity in even our most difficult opponents, and we adopted a long-term view that keeps momentary provocations in their proper, smaller perspective. We committed to the nightly self-examination that ensures our quietness stems from strength and not fear, and we became aware of how our non-verbal communication, our posture, our bearing, can disarm tension without a single word. We uncovered the power of humility to dissolve conflicts by releasing our need to be right, and we learned to treat insults as irrelevant opinions that hold no authority over our self-worth. We transformed listening into an act of deep presence and cognitive generosity, and we recognized the immense courage required to choose restraint over retaliation. We saw how consistency in character makes us predictably virtuous, removing the tools of manipulation from those who would provoke us, and we learned to see time as an ally, practicing patience as a strategic virtue. We used gratitude to shift our focus from what's wrong to what's still right, and we reconnected with the Stoic concept of shared humanity, remembering that we are all part of a common whole. We practiced the discipline of desire, wanting less from others so we would have less to lose, and we embraced our role as living examples, understanding that our quiet composure can set a new standard and influence our entire environment. Each of these principles converges on a single, transformative truth. By mastering the quiet within ourselves, we disarm the chaos around us. Your quiet response is the ultimate demonstration of inner freedom, proving that your peace is not contingent on anyone else's behavior. As Epictetus so perfectly expressed, no person is free who is not master of themselves. Your journey toward this mastery begins not with changing others, but with the next conscious choice you make in the face of a provocation. Will you react from impulse or will you respond from principle? Will you fuel the conflict or will you embody the peace? The power to choose is and has always been entirely yours. If this exploration of Stoic wisdom has resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel for more insights into living with greater clarity and purpose. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What is one situation where you plan to practice the power of a quieter response? Let's continue this conversation and learn from each other's experiences in building a